Charles Sanders Peirce. In the intellectual ferment that developed after the Civil War, a group of Harvard students and teachers met to form what they call the Metaphysical Club. The members of the club discussed various problems and attempted to work out new solutions to them. Three of the leading figures in this group are usually credited with being the co-founders of pragmatism, namely Chauncey Wright, Charles Sanders Peirce, and William James. Chauncey Wright was a lecturer in psychology and physics who was in correspondence with Darwin. He was one of the first Americans to argue that through the use of scientific and practical methods, metaphysical questions could finally be resolved. Peirce, who invented the name pragmatism, was a highly original thinker. The term was taken from the Greek word pragma, which means a thing alone or a discussion. Peirce was amazingly well versed in medieval thought, especially in the theories of the great scholastic metaphysician Duns Scotus and in the original works of some of the founders of modern science such as Kepler and Galileo. He wrote voluminously on scientific, mathematical, logical and philosophical subjects. His contribution to pragmatism is notable. For Peirce, pragmatic method was primarily one for rendering our ideas clear so that philosophy could be transformed into a positive science. He was dismayed when James used the method to construct a new philosophy, much at variance with his own metaphysical views. So Peirce called himself a pragmaticist to differentiate his position from that of other pragmatic philosophers. In his article, namely, How to Make Our Ideas Clear, he attempts to explain the meaning of concepts and theories in terms of their practical effects and consequences. Instead of treating theories and concepts as abstractions, the pragmatic view regards them as proposals for doing something within the realm of actual experience. Ideas are to be considered meaningful only if it is possible to conceive of consequences that would affect our experience if the ideas were either true or false. Pragmatic method is a way of examining ideas and theories with respect to their function in an application to experience. Peirce was deeply suspicious of traditional metaphysics. He believed that his pragmatism would show that almost every proposition of ontological metaphysics is either meaningless or gibberish, one word being defined by other words and they by still others without any real conception ever being reached. His aim was to confine philosophy to a series of problems capable of investigation by the observational methods of the true sciences. Peirce fondly referred to his own philosophy as a laboratory method, as it could obtain concrete, experimentally confirmed results. According to Peirce, the aim of all inquiry is the production of a belief. Belief is not just a mental state, it is a disposition to act in a certain way. This key consideration accounts for the label pragmatism, pragma meaning practice, action, things alone. Peirce considers what effects which might conceivably have practical bearings we conceive the object of our conception to have. Then our conception of these effects is the whole of our conception of the object. For instance, when we believe that a substance is hard, we expect that this belief will have certain consequences. Example, that the surface of the substance cannot be easily scratched. Our belief is true when the consequences we expect from the object or our conception actually do take place. When the conception disappoints our expectations, the belief is false. For example, the concept canals on Mars is meaningful only in terms of possible practical ways it can enter into and affect our experience. According to pragmatic theory, what matters is what we could do if we believed that canals existed on Mars, as contrasted with what we would do if we believed that they did not exist, or how each belief would affect our expectations of our future experiences. If there were no difference at all between the possible consequences of believing and not believing that the canals exist, then there is something peculiar about the concept canals on the Mars. It is meaningless in practice, or it has no cash value. However, in this case, the concept is meaningful since we can state a series of consequences indicating what we would expect to see if we took a rocket ship to Mars, what we would expect to see if a rocket photographed Mars, and what we would expect to happen if an attempt were made to land on Mars. Each of these expectations would be different if we believed that there were canals or if we believed that there were none. To be precise, pragmatism refers to any theoretical perspective that emphasizes the practical, that subordinates theoretical to useful concerns. PEIRCE holds that, within quotes, we must not begin by talking of pure ideas, vagabond thoughts that tramp the public roads without any human habitation, but must begin with men and their conversation. The pragmatist view of truth are naturalist views. We should not add anything metaphysical to first order inquiry. The concept of truth has to be extracted from our practices of inquiry, reason, giving and deliberation. PEIRCE conceives pragmatism as a method of reflection having for its purpose to render ideas clear. It belongs to methodology, to what is called methodeutic. It is method or rule for making ideas clear, for determining the meaning of ideas. But the ideas are of different types. First, there is the idea of a perspective or sense datum, considered in itself without relation to anything else. PEIRCE calls this as the idea of firstness. Secondly, there is the idea of acting, which involves two objects, namely the agent and the patient, or that which is acted upon. This is the idea of secondness. Thirdly, there is the idea of a sign relation, of a sign signifying to an interpreter that a certain property belongs to a certain object, or rather to a certain kind of object. This is the idea of thirdness. Such ideas, which can be thought of as universal ideas, are called by PEIRCE intellectual concepts. In practice, pragmatism is a method or rule for determining their meaning. PEIRCE formulates the principle of pragmatism as follows, within quotes, in order to ascertain the meaning of an intellectual conception, one should consider what practical consequences might conceivably result by necessity from the truth that conception and the sum of these consequences will constitute the entire meaning of the conception. For example, suppose someone tells me that a certain kind of object is hard, and suppose that I do not know what the word hard means, it can be explained to me that to say that an object is hard means, among other things, that if one exerts moderate pressure on it, it does not give in the way that butter does, that if someone sits on it, he does not sink through, and so on. The sum total of practical consequences which necessarily follows, if it is true to say that an object is hard, gives the entire meaning of the concept. If I do not believe this, I have to exclude all such practical consequences from the meaning of the term. Then it becomes impossible to distinguish between the meaning of hard and soft. PEIRCE's view is that the meaning of an intellectual concept can be explicated in terms of the ideas of necessary relationship between ideas of volition or action and the ideas of perception.